It was 42 degrees that night when my son's wife handed me an old blanket and said, "The garage is all yours. Try not to slam the door." I stood there, holding the blanket like a stray handed scraps. The smell of motor oil and mildew slapped me as I stepped inside. I didn't argue. I just lay down beside the lawnmower and stared at the ceiling, because what they didn't know was that the house they lived in still had my name on the deed. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always the woman they shoved into the garage. Once, I was the center of the house, the one who made birthdays magical, stitched loose buttons without being asked, and remembered everyone's favorite pie. My name is Margaret Ruth Holloway, but everyone used to call me Maggie. My late husband Bill called me steel wrapped in velvet. I used to laugh when he said it, but maybe he saw something in me I hadn't yet. After Bill died, 31 years ago, I raised our son Daniel on my own. We lived modestly, but proudly. I was a second-grade teacher by day and a janitor at the courthouse at night. Every paycheck went toward that little house on Meadow Lane. I remember clutching the final deed in both hands, heart pounding like it was my diploma. That house wasn't just a roof. It was my life's work, brick by brick, memory by memory. Daniel was a good kid. Sweet, curious, always trailing behind me asking big questions. He once said, "One day I'll buy you a mansion." "Mama," I'd laugh and say, "Just visit me on Sundays and we'll call it even." He married young. Claire was pretty in a brittle way, always perfectly put together, always watching me like she was trying to find a flaw. I gave her my grandmother's china on their first Christmas together. She looked at the box like I'd handed her a bag of trash. "Thanks," she said, "but we're not really into antiques." I swallowed a lot in those years. They struggled. Job losses, moves, arguments. I overheard during awkward Sunday visits. When they asked to move in for a few months after Daniel lost his job, I didn't think twice. "Of course," I said. "This is your home too." I gave them the master bedroom, moved my things into the smaller room down the hall without complaint. I told myself it was temporary. Families help each other. That's what love looks like. At first, it was fine. Claire smiled more often. Daniel helped around the yard. I watched their daughter Lily when they ran errands or went out for date nights. I got to braid her hair and teach her how to write her name. Those little joys made it all worth it. But slowly, things began to shift. My rocking chair vanished from the living room one afternoon. "We're going for a modern look," Claire explained. "We moved your chair to the garage so it wouldn't get damaged." I nodded, though my stomach clenched. I told myself it was just a chair. Then I noticed my spice rack missing, my embroidered pillows replaced. My schedule, once my own, began to revolve around their convenience. Claire started sending me grocery lists. Daniel stopped calling me Mom and started calling me Ma in that flat, uncomfortable tone. Made breakfast every morning. Eggs, bacon, toast. They never came to the table. One day I heard Claire say, "Why does she keep cooking like this is the 1950s? Daniel just laughed. So I stopped cooking. One afternoon, Claire handed me a laminated sheet of paper titled Household Expectations. It had things like quiet hours, shared space rules, and no unapproved visitors. I stared at it for a long time before tucking it into the drawer beside my bed. I never mentioned it. What could I say? Then came the real blow. I returned from a walk to find my bedroom door blocked with storage boxes. Claire said it was just temporary. They needed the space for Lily's toys and seasonal decor. Daniel added, "It's not a big deal. You're usually in the garage anyway, right?" That night, I stood in the garage for the first time, holding a flashlight and a blanket. They'd already set up a thin mattress beside the lawnmower. There was a single outlet, no heat, and a bottle of air freshener on the windowsill, like that somehow made it humane. I smiled and said thank you. Then I sat down on the edge of that mattress and wrapped my coat around my shoulders. I didn't cry. Not yet. The worst part wasn't the cold or the bugs or the loneliness. It was knowing that Daniel saw it all and let it happen. That the boy I raised, the one I'd carried through fevers and scraped knees, now let his wife banish me. Like clutter, they thought I was powerless. That age had softened me into something forgettable. But they forgot one thing. I still owned that house. Every tile, every faucet, every square inch, and I was done being invisible. I held Daniel's baby teeth in a keepsake box. I tucked that box beside me in the cold garage. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't staying out of love anymore. I was staying out of habit. The thing about slow cruelty is that it doesn't show up with fists or yelling. It arrives politely, with soft voices, with phrases like, "We just thought it'd be easier if," and "we didn't think you'd mind." At first, I tried to believe it was all just misunderstanding, that maybe I was too sensitive, that maybe I really was in the way. Claire was younger, modern, busy. Maybe she needed her space. Maybe Daniel was just overwhelmed. Maybe this wasn't malice, just growing pains. But then I noticed the pattern. My belongings were always the first to go, replaced with minimalist decor and online orders that came in boxes stacked by the front door. My cookbooks were boxed and stored. My coffee mugs replaced with thin glass cups. My towels, labeled old, were donated without asking. I remember overhearing them from the hallway one night. Daniel said, "She's not going to be around forever." Claire replied, "Exactly. Why should we keep living like it's her house?" I backed away before I heard the rest. The next morning, I found that the house key I'd used for 30 years no longer worked. Daniel said it must have been an accident after they had the locks updated. He handed me a new key like it was a gift. I smiled and said thank you. Then I went into the garage and sat on my mattress for a long time, key in hand, wondering how many more accidents would come. Still I tried. I baked an apple pie, the kind Daniel loved as a boy. I left it on the kitchen counter with a note, just because. When I came back later, it was untouched. A store-bought cake sat on the counter instead. Claire looked at me and said, "Oh, Lily, wanted chocolate. Sorry." They never even noticed that I stopped eating dinner with them, or that I started taking my meals in the garage. I kept canned soup and crackers on a little shelf by the water heater. I wasn't allowed to use the main fridge anymore. Claire said I was cluttering it with old-fashioned stuff. One afternoon, I tried to sit with Lily in the living room. She was watching a show I didn't recognize. I asked her how school was, and she shrugged. Then, without looking up, she said, "Mom says you don't really work anymore, that you just sit around." I didn't correct her. Instead, I went outside and pulled weeds from the flower beds, even though my knees were aching. I needed to do something that reminded me of who I was before all this began. Something real. A neighbor waved from across the street. "Still taking care of that place like always, Maggie?" I smiled. Old habits die hard. But inside, something was dying. Not fast, not dramatic, just a slow fading of worth. That night, I sat down and went through a box I hadn't touched in years. Deeds, letters, certificates, mortgage papers. I unfolded the house title and traced my name with my finger. Margaret Ruth Holloway, sole owner. They'd forgotten. Or maybe they assumed I'd forgotten, but I hadn't. A few days later, Claire brought me a paper to sign. "Just some insurance forms," she said. I looked at the paper. It was about transferring homeowners' insurance to Daniel's name. I smiled sweetly and said, "I'll need time to read it." She rolled her eyes. "It's just paperwork, Maggie." "Even so," I said, "I still like to read the fine print." That was the day I knew, without a doubt, they were planning something. They didn't want me to live in the garage. They wanted me gone, quietly, No mess, just out of the way. What they didn't expect was that I'd see them coming. One morning, I found my wedding photo in the trash. Bent, coffee grounds on the frame. No apology, just silence. I picked it up, cleaned it gently with a dish towel, and carried it to the garage. I placed it beside my bed. That night, while they laughed over dinner in the house I built, I wrote down a phone number I had seen on a local ad for a real estate agent. Discreet, fast closings, top market value for mature sellers. And I thought, maybe it's time I stopped surviving in silence. They called me a squatter behind closed doors. They stripped my name from birthday cards. They rekeyed my home like I was a tenant. But they forgot. The house was never theirs to give. Baked her mother's peach cobbler recipe, hoping to share a moment. She told me, "We're gluten-free now," and scraped the dish into the trash. I stood there, holding the empty pan, and decided right then, I would never be disposable again. The nights grew colder after Thanksgiving. The wind slipped through the gaps in the garage door like a thief, stealing whatever warmth I could gather. Under my 2 blankets, I wore 2 pairs of socks and an old winter coat I'd bought when Daniel was in high school. It still had a tear on the sleeve where Lily once tugged it too hard. I asked just once if we could maybe look into a small space heater. Claire didn't even look up from her phone. "We're already paying the bills. We can't run up electricity." For the garage, too. Daniel mumbled something about how I could layer up. So I did. I layered until I couldn't bend properly, until the cold stopped hurting and just became part of me. Food stopped being offered altogether. Some days I found leftovers on a plate by the garage door, usually scraps from Lily's meals. Other days, nothing. I took to keeping peanut butter crackers in a shoebox under the bed, and a thermos so I didn't have to ask for hot water. No one noticed when I skipped meals, or if they did, they didn't care. One evening, I walked into the main house to grab my mail, and Claire was hosting a dinner party. Her friends looked me up and down like I was the help. Claire laughed and said, "Oh, that's Daniel's mother. She just likes to keep to herself." I stood there, holding the mail and my pride, wondering when I'd stopped being a mother and started being an embarrassment. That night, I made myself a cup of instant soup in the garage. While I was sipping, I noticed something odd. My prescription bottle was missing. I searched everywhere. Nothing. I asked Daniel the next day, and he looked confused. "Are you sure you didn't misplace it?" Claire chimed in. "Maybe you're just getting forgetful. It happens." I knew I hadn't misplaced it. I remembered placing it on the shelf, same as always. I had a refill ready, but I waited. Something in me didn't want them knowing I'd noticed. That was the first time I considered that this might not just be neglect, that maybe slowly they were erasing me, not by force, but by indifference, by starving me of care, of space, of dignity. One weekend, I heard music and laughter through the wall. I looked out the garage window and saw balloons in the backyard, tables, chairs, a full spread. I watched through the slats of the fence as Lily blew out candles. No one had told me, no invitation, no knock on the door. I stayed quiet. I didn't want to ruin her day. I just watched, silently, as the family I had built celebrated without me, 15 feet away. Later that night, after the last car had pulled away, I wandered into the kitchen to clean up. Claire appeared behind me. "Don't worry about it," she said flatly. "We've got it." Daniel just looked at me. Not angry, not sorry, just blank. That look hurt more than any words could have. I turned to go and saw a gift bag on the counter, pink tissue paper, a little card sticking out. I don't know what made me peek, but I did. Inside was a spa gift certificate with a note that read, "To Claire's mom, thank you for everything. We love you." Claire's mother. I never got a thank you, not once. I went back to the garage and sat on the edge of the mattress for hours. No tears, just stillness. The next day, I made an appointment with the real estate agent. Her name was Angela, and her voice was warm. "Take your time," she said. "I work discreetly. You tell me when you're ready." I didn't tell her the full story, not yet. I just asked about the process, what paperwork I'd need, how quickly a house could sell in this market. She asked if anyone else was on the deed. I said no. When beat, I hung up. I felt my heart beat for the first time in weeks. Not fear, not hope, just something alive. I started making lists in my notebook. What to pack, what to donate, what to keep. I did it quietly. After all, they had taught me how to disappear. One night, I woke up shivering and turned on the little flashlight I kept by the bed. I saw frost forming on the inside of the garage window. I reached for my gloves but found them soaked. Lily must have knocked over the water bottle earlier. I sat there, frozen, and thought, if I died tonight, they wouldn't even know until morning? And even then, Claire would probably complain about having to clean the mattress. I reached for the photo of Bill on the shelf. His smile hadn't changed in 30 years. I could still hear his voice. "Never let anyone make you feel small in your own home, Maggie. Not ever." That's when I knew they weren't just waiting for me to leave. They were waiting for me to give up, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I stood at the back door with frost in my hair and my teeth chattering. I knocked once, holding the empty soup thermos. Claire opened it, sighed, and said, "Can you wait a bit? We're in the middle of a movie." I looked past her, saw Daniel lounging on the couch, and whispered, "I won't be here much longer." She didn't hear me, but I meant every word. I used to keep the house humming like a song. Every corner had a rhythm. Laundry spinning on Wednesdays. Windows open for the breeze on Saturdays. Cinnamon and vanilla in the air on Sundays. It was quiet work, invisible to everyone but me. And that was fine. I didn't need praise. I just needed presence. Togetherness. Now the silence in that garage swallowed sound. My movements no longer made music. They made dust. One morning, I opened a cardboard box I'd shoved under the shelf years ago. Inside, wrapped in old newspaper, were fragments of the life I used to hold dear. My wedding invitation, Bill's cufflinks, Daniel's hospital bracelet from the day he was born. The sight of it hit me harder than I expected. I sat back against the cold wall, running my thumb along the plastic band. Daniel had come into this, whirled red-faced and screaming, fists clenched like he had something to fight for. I'd never been more terrified or more certain that I'd do anything for someone. And I had, for 34 years. The garage light flickered. I stayed still, holding that bracelet in my palm like it might explain how we got here. How the boy who once begged me to stay and read one more bedtime story was now locking the door behind me. In that dim quiet, the memories began unspooling like film. I remembered one Christmas. Daniel was 7. We didn't have enough money for decorations, so I strung popcorn and cranberries across the window and folded tin foil into stars. He called it the best tree in the whole world. That year, he made me a card that said, "You're the strongest mom on earth." I kept it in my wallet until it fell apart, and I remembered the day Bill died, a Tuesday. Rain fell heavy on the roof, and I couldn't cry in front of Daniel. He was just 10. I held him all night whispering, "We'll be okay, baby. I promise. We were." For a while, I buried every want I had for that boy, passed up promotions to make it to his recitals, ate toast for dinner so he could go on school trips. I never thought I'd be repaid. Love doesn't come with receipts. But I also never imagined this. I came back to the present and looked around the garage. Concrete floor, rusted tools, my pillow damp from the leaky ceiling, my wedding photo, balanced precariously on a paint can. I felt something shift in me, not rage, not grief. something quieter. Clarity. They didn't see me anymore, not as a mother, not even as a person. I was a chore to manage, a burden to reduce, and I had allowed it. A few days later, I found my old journal, dusty, yellowed at the edges, but still intact. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, slowly, deliberately, I am still here, and I remember everything. That night, Claire barged into the garage without knocking. Her arms were crossed. Did you use the washing machine last night? I nodded. It was after your quiet hours, wasn't it? She snapped. You can't just do what you want. There are rules in this house. I stared at her, calm. Whose house? I asked. She froze. For a second her mouth opened, then shut. She blinked. What? I smiled. Just a little. Whose house, Claire? She didn't answer. She left, muttering something under her breath. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Something had broken open in me, not from her words, but from the weight of the years, from the memories of who I used to be. Later that evening, I looked at Bill's photo and whispered, I think I'm ready now. Ready to stop hoping they'd remember. Ready to stop trying to be allowed in. Ready to reclaim what I built with my bare hands. The next morning, I called Angela, the realtor, again. My voice didn't tremble this time. I want to start the process, I said. Quietly, but officially. She didn't ask questions, just said, Absolutely, Maggie. We'll take care of everything. I hung up and felt the deepest exhale. I'd breathed in months. Have you ever felt like a guest in your own home? Tell me below. I'm listening. I picked up the wedding photo from the paint can and dusted off the frame. For 30 years, I lived for them. For Claire. For Daniel. For Lily. But that night, I whispered one small sentence into the dark. I think it's time I live for me. Angela, the realtor, showed up 2 days later, wearing a beige coat and a smile that didn't pry. She didn't step into the garage, just stood at the side gate with a clipboard and a voice soft as rain. You don't have to explain anything, Maggie, she said gently. You've got a beautiful home. Let's make sure you walk away with something to show for it. I hadn't heard someone say my name like that in a long time, with care, with recognition. She walked through the house while Daniel and Claire were out at work and Lily was at school. I followed quietly behind her, trying not to look at the places that once held my life. The walls I'd painted with Bill, the cabinets we'd stained together on a summer weekend. I walked like I was saying goodbye to ghosts. Angela turned and smiled. If you're ready, I'll get a discreet listing live within the week. I already have buyers in this area. I nodded. Don't tell them anything. Not yet. I won't, she said. This is still your home. For the first time in months, I felt that might actually be true. Over the next few days, I began to gather the pieces of myself I'd tucked away. My mother's jewelry box, Bill's old pocket knife, the recipe cards with faded ink. I packed them slowly, one at a time, as if folding memories into a suitcase. I found a photo album buried under Christmas decorations. Inside was a picture of me holding baby Daniel on the front porch, sunlight in my hair. My eyes were tired but proud. I ran my fingers over the edge and smiled. I began to walk differently after that. A little straighter, a little less careful. I wasn't hiding anymore. Claire noticed first. Are you expecting someone? She asked, one eyebrow raised. You've been moving things. Just organizing, I said. Spring cleaning? I suppose. She gave me a long, suspicious look. It's December. Exactly, I replied, and turned back to my boxes. She didn't like that. But Daniel, he didn't say much at all. I could tell he felt the shift, but couldn't name it. He'd sit at the table, scrolling through his phone, eyes flicking up at me, and then away. I caught him watching me once, as I packed a framed needlepoint into a box. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but he didn't, and I didn't prompt him. Angela called back with 2 offers within 5 days, both well over asking price. I almost dropped the phone. I hadn't expected it to move so quickly, but then again, the universe has a way of responding once you finally stop shrinking. I can finalize everything in 10 days, she said. We can close while they're at work, if that's what you want. It is, I said. That night, I sat in the garden with a cup of tea, wrapped in a blanket. It was cold, but peaceful, the kind of cold that doesn't hurt, just reminds you you're alive. The roses were dormant now. Bare branches twisted into the air. But I knew, come spring, they'd bloom again. I breathed in and tried to picture my next home. I didn't need much, just space to breathe. Maybe a window that faced the sunrise. Maybe a place where no one sighed when I walked into the room. I could almost feel it already. Claire found the for sale sign before I could stop her. It had been tucked behind the hedge, as Angela promised. Not meant to be discovered just yet, but Claire went out back with the recycling and came back with fire in her eyes. "You're selling the house?" she hissed, storming into the kitchen. Daniel looked up, startled. "What is she talking about?" I stood at the edge of the hallway. "Yes," I said calmly. "I am." Claire's mouth opened and closed. "You can't just... You didn't even... I don't need your permission," I said. Daniel blinked. "Mom, why would you do that?" I looked at him for a long time. I saw my baby boy in there somewhere, buried deep under years of apathy and convenience. I gave you space, Daniel. I gave you the master bedroom. I gave you groceries, babysitting, silence when you needed it. I gave you everything I had, and when you ran out of use for me, you gave me a mattress beside the lawnmower. His mouth opened to respond, but I raised my hand. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm done." He looked like he wanted to cry. Claire looked like she wanted to scream. I walked past both of them, poured myself a glass of water, and went back to the garage. The next morning, the sale moved forward. They didn't try to stop it. Not really. Maybe because they knew they couldn't. Or maybe because, somewhere deep inside, they understood. This wasn't just about a house. It was about me, finally standing up. I ran a soft cloth over the windowsill one last time, my fingers tracing the edge where Lily once lined up her dolls. I smiled and whispered, "Thank you," to the walls. Not because they were kind, but because they taught me what I would no longer accept. The shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with glances, fleeting, anxious, calculating, the kind of silence that tastes like panic behind tight lips. The day after I confirmed the buyer and the closing date, Daniel came out to the garage with 2 mugs of coffee. He hadn't brought me coffee in years. "Thought you might want to sit on the porch today," he said, too casual. I took the mug, watching his hands tremble slightly. "Why now?" I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Can't a son share a cup of coffee with his mom?" I didn't answer. But I knew what this was. A delay tactic, a guilt attempt, maybe even a last-minute bid to remind me I was needed. That tactic might have worked months ago. But now, all I felt was a quiet sadness for him, for the man he could have been. Claire changed her tone too. Gone was the clipped edge, replaced with syrupy politeness. "Would you like to eat dinner with us tonight? I'm making that mushroom risotto you like." I looked her straight in the eye. "The one you said smelled like a nursing home?" She blinked. Well, tastes change. Mine haven't. That evening, I heard them whispering in the kitchen, not arguing exactly, but the air was tight, stretched. "She can't do this," Claire hissed. "She can," Daniel muttered. "It's her name on the papers." I stood by the hallway, unashamed this time. I didn't move away when Daniel noticed me. He stared for a second too long, then looked down. I returned to the garage and began taping boxes shut. 3 days before closing, Claire accidentally blocked in my car with hers in the driveway. I didn't have anywhere urgent to be, but the message was clear. You stay put. You don't leave without our permission. I called Angela from the backyard, my voice low. Let's move the key handoff to 8 a.m. sharp. They'll be out for work. By then, she didn't ask why. She understood. Later that night, I came into the main house to get my sweater from the dryer. The door was locked, not just closed, locked. I stood there in the cold, staring at that doorknob for what felt like an hour. They didn't unlock it. The next morning, I asked Daniel if there was a problem with the lock. He shrugged. Oh, maybe it jammed, you know. How old doors are. That was the moment it became real for them, that they weren't just losing free childcare or rent-free living. They were losing the roof over their heads. They were losing control. 2 days before closing, a couple stopped by with a clipboard and friendly smiles. Potential buyers? No. Angela had already accepted an offer. These were the home inspectors. Claire opened the door, furious. Who are you? The woman smiled. Just here for a final walkthrough. Your realtor should have informed you. Claire turned to me. You told them they could come inside without asking me? I smiled. I didn't need to. They're coming into my home. She didn't respond, just stormed off. Daniel followed me into the garage later. What are we supposed to do, Mom? He asked quietly. We have nowhere else to go. You'll figure it out, I said, folding another sweater into my suitcase. I always did. He sat on the edge of the mattress, rubbing his hands together. We didn't mean to push you away. Things just got busy. Claire has a lot on her plate, and you had a choice, I said softly. And you made it, every day. He looked at me like he wanted to ask for forgiveness, but I wasn't there to give it anymore. Not right now. Maybe not ever. That night, Lily knocked on the garage door with a drawing in her hand. Grandma, she said, are you going away? I knelt beside her. I'm going somewhere new, baby, somewhere quiet. Will you come back? I smiled gently. Maybe. One day. She handed me the drawing. It was a picture of me standing under a sun, a house in the distance behind me. The words, Grandma's new home. She didn't understand the full story, but somehow she knew enough. I kept that drawing in my coat pocket. On the final night before closing, I made one last walk through the house. My house. I paused by the front door, touched the doorknob that had welcomed me home for over 3 decades. I walked past the kitchen where I taught Daniel to measure flour, past the hallway where I once danced with Bill to a scratched-up jazz record. Claire didn't look at me when I passed her in the living room. Daniel stood by the window, hands in his pockets. Neither said a word, but I did. Don't be late for work tomorrow, I said quietly. 8 a.m. is coming fast. I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, but from something sharper, anticipation and peace. I zipped the last suitcase closed and opened the garage door just before sunrise. The street was still, the sky turning a soft coral. I breathed in the morning air and whispered to myself, this is the last night I'll ever be unwelcome in my own home. The morning of the closing arrived like a held breath, cool, quiet, and impossibly still. At 7:55 a.m., I was dressed and ready, suitcase by my side, keys in my coat pocket, papers neatly tucked into my handbag. The garage, once a place of exile, looked different in the dawn light. I glanced back once before stepping out. I wouldn't miss it. Not the cold, not the loneliness, not the quiet sobs muffled into a pillow. But I would remember it. Not as punishment. As proof. Angela was already parked down the street, engine running, face unreadable behind the windshield. We had arranged everything like clockwork. The buyers would arrive at 8:10. Claire and Daniel would already be gone. The papers were signed, the keys exchanged. The house would be theirs, and I would be free. At 8:03, I heard the front door slam. Claire's heels clicked against the porch, followed by Daniel's low, tired voice. Lily trailed behind, dragging her sparkly pink backpack across the step. "Don't forget to grab your lunch," Claire barked. "I got it," Daniel muttered. Their car door shut with a satisfying thunk. Tires crunched down the driveway. Just like that, they were gone. I stepped onto the porch a minute later and locked the door behind me for the last time, not to keep myself safe, but to keep myself out no longer. I stood on the front step, sunlight warming my face. At exactly 8:10, a silver SUV rolled up. A young couple stepped out, smiling, bright-eyed, holding hands. The woman gasped at the garden. The man nodded appreciatively at the siding. This would be their beginning. Angela stepped out of her car and waved. I handed her the keys without a word. It was done. Legally, irrevocably. She placed a soft hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I smiled. "I think I am." "Want to wait?" "Around to see their reaction?" I shook my head. "No, that part's not for me. Let the house speak for itself." We drove away without ceremony. No dramatic glance over the shoulder, no soundtrack. Just the quiet hum of tires on asphalt, the slow release of something I hadn't realized I'd been gripping for years. Halfway down the block, my phone rang. Daniel. I let it buzz. Then again. Then Claire's number flashed on the screen. Angela looked over, but didn't say anything. Voicemail. Then another. And another. When we reached the stop sign at the corner, I finally opened the first one. Daniel's voice, breathless, edged with panic. "Mom, what the hell is going on? There are people here, strangers, saying they bought the house. That can't be real. This has to be a mistake, right? You didn't actually sell the house. Please call me back." The second message was shorter. Claire, shrill and furious. "You crazy old woman, how dare you do this to us? After everything we gave you, after all the years we let you live here, and you do this? We'll sue you. You hear me? You're not going to get away with this." I hit delete, then again and again. Their voices became just noise. Background hum. I took out Lily's drawing from my coat pocket, Grandma's new home, written in purple crayon, and traced the little sun she'd drawn above my head. I wondered what they looked like when they walked back inside. When they realized their toothbrushes, their clothes, their lives weren't protected by ownership. Just assumption. The garage? Still there, empty. The mattress? Still cold. But they'd find it wasn't theirs anymore. And they'd realize what I already had, that a house doesn't keep you safe when it doesn't belong to you in spirit. I hadn't taken anything from them. I'd simply taken back what they thought I'd forgotten was mine. Angela pulled into a small cafe just outside town. "You want breakfast? We've got time before your lease meeting." I nodded. "I think I'd like pancakes," she smiled. "Good choice." We sat in a booth by the window. I ordered pancakes with strawberries, a side of eggs, and coffee with real cream. The sun poured in, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to make room for someone else's comfort. My phone buzzed one more time. Daniel again. This time I picked up. He was quiet at first. Then, "You really did it?" "Yes," I said. "I did." He didn't respond. Then, "We don't have anywhere to go. Lily's confused. Claire's angry. You blindsided us." "No," I said softly. "I just finally stopped being blind." He inhaled sharply, like he wanted to fight me. But he didn't. "Was it always this bad?" he asked, voice small. "No," I said. "It started with silence. And you let it grow." He said nothing. I didn't expect him to. I left the storage key with the neighbors. "Your things are safe, but you're going to have to find your own way now, like I did. like I always did. I heard him swallow hard. Are you ever coming back? I already did, I said. To myself. Then I hung up. I stirred cream into my coffee, watching it swirl like clouds before clearing. For the first time in years, I felt the room stretch out around me. Mine. Unapologetically. I didn't wait to see the locks changed. I didn't need to. As I stepped out of the cafe and into the soft morning sun, I realized something. I hadn't just sold the house, I'd bought back my freedom. I moved into a small, sunlit apartment 2 towns over. Nothing grand, just a second-floor unit with a tiny balcony that faced east. Every morning, I sit with a mug of coffee and watch the sky burn open with light. No footsteps above me, no voices behind closed doors, no cold air creeping in under garage doors, just me, and silence, the kind that soothes instead of stings. The first night in the new place, I unpacked slowly. A single suitcase, a few boxes. I set my wedding photo on the shelf beside my journal. I folded Daniel's baby bracelet into the drawer and placed Lily's crayon drawing on the fridge. Then I sat on the carpet and let the quiet settle into my bones like a lullaby. The strangest part wasn't the emptiness. It was the relief. No one needed anything from me. No one hovered or dismissed or forgot I was there. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. A few days later, I went to the community center down the street. They were offering painting classes for seniors. I hadn't picked up a brush in decades. I didn't say much the first class, just listened to the instructor and mixed soft blues and muted golds on the edge of the palette. The canvas wasn't pretty, but it was mine. That was enough. I got a letter from Daniel the following week, handwritten, uneven. The kind of letter that doesn't start with Dear Mom, but with I don't know where to begin. He wrote that Claire had moved in with her sister for now, that Lily was confused and kept asking why Grandma wasn't coming back, that he hadn't realized how far things had gone, that he wished he'd said something sooner, done something sooner. That he was sorry. He asked if I would ever come visit, if I'd consider sitting down for a conversation. Just the 2 of us. I read it twice. Then again, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because forgiveness, when it comes, arrives. Like a whisper, not a wave. I placed the letter in a box with old photos. I didn't write back. Not yet. Forgiveness is sacred, and it should never be rushed to soothe someone else's discomfort. Instead, I kept painting. I met a woman named Ruth at the art class. Widow, 2 grown kids, both on the other coast. She had a dry wit and wore her silver hair in a braid down her back. We started taking walks after class, talked about books, recipes, life before and after husbands. I told her part of my story one afternoon over tea. She didn't flinch or offer pity. She just nodded and said, "They forgot who you were, so you reminded them." That night, I wrote a new journal entry. This time, I came home to myself. My days found their rhythm again. I cooked small meals, cleaned the apartment just enough. I read by the window until the light dipped past the railing. I even bought a small heater, not because I needed it, but because I could. Claire never reached out. Daniel called once more. I didn't answer. His voicemail was short. "I hope you're okay. Lily misses you. I do too." I listened, then deleted it. Maybe one day we'd speak again. Maybe not. But healing, I realized, isn't something you give away to those who hurt you. It's something you keep for yourself. A garden you protect. A door you learn how to close, not to punish, but to preserve. If you were in her shoes, would you have done the same, or walked away sooner? Tell me in the comments. Your stories matter too. I stood on my balcony one crisp morning, watching a small child ride her bike down the street, her mother jogging behind her. Laughter echoed. A door opened in the building across from mine, and The scent of something warm and familiar floated through the air. Cinnamon, maybe. Apples. Something like home. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and smiled. I water my new houseplants every Sunday now. 3 little pots lined up by the kitchen window. I named them after women I admire: Rosa, Eleanor, and Ruth. They're thriving. So am I. If you've made it this far, thank you. Maybe you saw parts of yourself in my story. Maybe you've been made to feel small in your own home. Maybe you've stayed silent to keep the peace. But let me leave you with this. You are not here to be tolerated. You are here to be treasured, and if they don't see your value, you don't have to stay and convince them. You can leave, you can choose yourself, and it doesn't make you cruel, it makes you free. As I write this now, the sky is turning lavender. Beyond my balcony, I've got tea steeping and a fresh canvas waiting for color. I think I'll paint a door today, wide open, bright, and empty, not because someone left, but because I finally walked through it.